I'm Adam Krob, and I'm the IT director at Bow Brothers Construction. We are a civil contractor, but we also do commercial work with a subsidiary of ours. So it's a nice, interesting combination of things. I've been in the field for about 10 years. Before that, I was in educational technology and
What
consulting.
do you care about, Adam? Beyond like the work that you do, or
I,
what
you know,
excites you?
I'm really big. I love my garden, but also lots of people who know me know that I'm going to be having a
Oh,
surgery this summer, and after that, I'm going to get back to something that I really want to do, which is get my
ooh,
scuba certification, and do some diving because I'd love to get back in the water and
nice.
see the beauty that's underneath the sea.
Yeah, yeah. We have some good dive spots in Sri Lanka.
Oh
That's where
yeah,
I
I
was
bet.
born. So if you want to come all the way down there, I think that'll be a great spot for you. No, and I also know you're a big writer now. We see a
Yes.
lot of content coming out, and you're trying to, I think, maybe simplify that like content a little bit more for the audience that we both care about. I think that's been something impactful I see.
Yeah, I think it's really hard in construction because, you know, I think we've got to build the use cases of AI. In the this last week I wrote an article about how sort of generic approaches to AI are not going to last in construction. That they really have to be focused on a particular workflow in the construction industry. When we talk a lot about it, supply chain, and that's a perfect opportunity to talk about that, which is that, you know, if we're just talking about AI spitting out some information and telling us, giving us some summary or some sort of, look ahead to what it predicts, but it's not based in the reality of the building, it's not gonna get sold. A lot of the work that I'm doing is rolling up my sleeves, talking to people, saying, uncovering what it is that they're trying to do, and then using an understanding of particularly some of these large language models and then the agent tools that are coming out of that, um, and building some things that'll I think long term be useful. But I really get annoyed when we have these sort of airy, lovely tools that are Swiss Army knives when what we really need in construction is a very sharp knife. Like we need a very specific tool for a very specific problem. You
And
know,
and 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 that's how Adam, you and I met. You said, "Hey,
yes,
like, okay, we have a supply chain problem. Let's go
right,
look at a supply chain solution,
right,
and let's even look at like if AI can make an impact in that problem statement, right? Like it,
exactly.
it might not, right?
Exactly. But and that's where I think that's where we're going to have to, I think, as as people providing solutions, whether that's inside the company or outside the company, we have to make sure that we're grounding it in that level of understanding. And you coming out of the field, you definitely understand the pain points of the construction. A lot of folks are coming out of other industries and are trying to apply approaches that worked in fintech or in another area, and some of them work and some of them don't. And a lot of them that don't work because they don't they don't live in the world of construction, and that's where
Yeah.
we've got to live.
So then, can I call you a little bit? Are you an entrepreneur within your organization, like going and talking to a lot of customers within your organization, asking questions, what are your problems, and then
Oh
try to
yeah,
solve them?
absolutely. And what we did, um, I think it's very interesting because I think AI is giving us an opportunity to refresh uh, our technology approach in construction and sort of maybe even revitalize it. If we could revitalize construction technology through AI, I think that there is an opportunity for us to leapfrog. And because, as you know, construction's been really a very slow adopter of technology. There are lots of reasons for that, uh, but and lots of excuses for that too, honestly. But I think AI is an opportunity, and then being an entrepreneur means going out, listening, giving people some tools and stepping away and saying, okay, so what did you find? What things are you finding that are useful? And then trying to bring it back up to the corporate level and distribute it more widely. And I think that that's one of those things that AI is so nascent and challenging in that way because it is moving so fast. I listen to a daily podcast and I feel like, oh my goodness, like every day it changes and every day there's something new. There's a new model, there's a new approach. You know, Mark Zuckerberg's trying to buy everybody who works in AI.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's also, I think the role that you're playing within your organization is becoming more and more critical, right? You help them cut through the noise and the BS and like really figure out what's going to solve the problem, right?
And for a long time in construction, there have been these innovation officers that are more around innovation. But this isn't as much about innovation, I don't think. I think this is about like integration of technology into key process elements. You know, one of the things that we've been working on quite a bit is around submittals and because it is such an important part of the material supply chain. And, you know, getting buyout done early is really crucial, which means getting that submittal process done right is important. And it just goes back to the longer you delay, the more it's going to cost. Like particularly now we're seeing price escalations that are affecting contract value.
Yep.
And we've got to take care of that in multiple different places. But we were having a conversation today about a subcontractor in a particular area, and I said, so in the end, you getting the information that they need and you getting it back, is that a supply chain issue? And they said, no, well, it's kind of a relationship issue. I said, in the end, it's a supply chain issue because if you can't get this knocked out and bought out now, you're going to see a 5% escalation in that price. So them not having, a clear understanding of what the final requirements are in that specification is going to mean that you're going to have a delay, which means you're going to have a cost. And so, anticipating, where that is, it gives leverage for you to drive different performance from your subcontractors, but it's also going to require that we rethink it because we've got to think about it not only for our cost and our margin, but also the cost and the potential impact for the owner. Because a lot of us are writing escalation clauses into our contracts these days. You know, we all learned a lesson in 2020 of how challenging that was. Is that with the escalations and the supply chain disruptions. But I had a conversation.
I see what you just did there. You sneaked in a little example there of what's going on. No, no,
Exactly.
I mean,
But
yeah,
I mean,
no, I
like
mean,
it really is interesting to see um, how, like in the end, you know, you and I had a conversation. We were talking about control and like like the core competency of project managers is risk mitigation, and that's bringing things that are out of control under control.
mm,
And one way to do that, one of the biggest places we have to do that in is in supply chain. In materials and, in the people who are going to install them properly. And, oftentimes we're dealing with challenging materials or in the case of civil, we're dealing with bulk materials that are huge and challenging. And we still have to get the provenance of every piece of steel because we have a contract that requires that we know where that came from.
yeah, and I think yeah, you and I've had like many conversations on this topic, and like that is what led to us both writing that article where we talked about like the three P's in supply chain, getting predictability, profitability, and productivity.
Hmm.
And how does that align with maybe one of the early choices that we make with like supply chain, right? Like, and like now it's got picked up by a few organizations, and I think it's something that I think everyone should read, and we'll share that here on this video as well, so that you guys can read that. Any sort of like key thoughts from that paper that we could sort of disseminate to everyone who's like listening?
I, one thing that I think is really important is, you know, thinking about everybody that is in that ecosystem, because in the end, the entire ecosystem is going to profit by a better approach to supply chain. It's not just going to be the GC, it's going to be the owner, it's going to be the subcontractor. A much more coherent approach, I think, is going to, mean better profit for everybody, and a better solution for everybody. We're going to get consistent materials. Like you said, predictability is such a huge thing. It is, we're all doing 2, 3, 4, 6 week look aheads. And if we don't know when our materials are going to be there with confidence, then we have a problem, which is why we're seeing people insourcing the, you know, the rolling out of the manufacture of some of their own materials. I was talking to a friend of mine who works for a big electrical contractor, and they're producing their own switchgear now because they can't consistently get it. They don't have predictability. If they own it, they get predictability, and honestly, then they're able to do it to their specification, to you know their timeline, and probably to do it less expensively with no markup from a subcontractor. So
Yeah, and I
that's an
think
interesting
yeah,
approach.
yeah, and I think like one of the lines that I love on that article was like having better metadata about supply chain and having a system of maybe a system of record and a system of intelligence is a strategic advantage or a strategic differentiator for
Hmm.
you as a company, because all of a sudden you have better data around your supply chain and performance. Now you can maybe at an enterprise level make decisions to mitigate that risk, right? And Adam, like we're seeing that in the market, right? Like we have
Yeah.
GCs who are now starting like procurement arms within their organization because they've
Yes.
realized, hey, like we cannot manage this risk contractually. Now we may need to sort of have either better data, or
Hmm.
maybe we have to procure the material by themselves because
Yes.
they otherwise they have no control.
And in that way, what's interesting is that, in software, we talk a lot about shifting left, and that's information, but also, problem solving. Uh, but it also means that if you have the leverage point earlier, you have a strategic advantage. It's like arbitrage, that if you know with confidence earlier on, you can make a prediction even in pre-construction that's going to maybe make that difference between you getting or not getting that contract. And so, like, I feel like supply chain is so important. It drives all the way back into pre-construction, into the bidding process. And if you have better control and better understanding there, you're likely to win much more frequently. And this is where, like, talking to our team about their bid day activities for a hard bid, they're using tools that they've never used before,
Mm.
to enable better information gathering, better information processing, and better confidence that they can deliver what they say they're going to deliver, and you're going to win more frequently that way.
Yeah. No, I think it was always an interesting challenge because like I think we like having like built projects like right like here in San Francisco where you know logistics is also such a huge
Yes.
focus, right? Like we're building in a very dense environment and you can't have sort of no if you don't have visibility of how much is coming, then it's going to impact productivity. Like that's one of the P's that we talked about, right?
Right.
Predictability is good with data. Okay, things are coming in, but to improve productivity, you can't have too much. All of a sudden, your
Right.
labor teams are like moving things around, looking for things rather than actually installing them. right? So
Yes.
there's that component to it, which then finally ties into profitability, right? For all parties, whether it's the trade partner, whether it's the GC. So it's such an interesting dynamic, and like being on the GC side and being sort of managing these projects, I felt like getting that control across trade partners and sort of helping them realize how much to bring that would improve their labor productivity was such a significant part to solving this issue as well. And it's and the challenge here is like technology alone can't like solve that, right? Like
Hmm.
that's an important part, right? Like we think sometimes like there's obviously an AI hype in the industry and like, oh, AI is going to do this, but like human has to be in the loop and has
Yes.
to still make the decisions with the data that
Right.
now we can sort through, and like that's where AI is more powerful.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting because, I was talking today about our asphalt production and how the availability of information about where trucks are, how many trucks have
Mm,
been delivered, and then also understanding what had been paved, how far along are we in the paving, and oddly, not oddly, traffic between the plant and the job site has made a real difference in scheduling appropriately. How many trucks are we actually going to need? How much material are we going to send to that truck? How much waste are we going to get back? And it really has made a difference in that area. And I think that area, that asphalt production area, is ahead of other areas in civil construction because it is so focused on a very specific area, a specific delivery type, and a specific material. But that concept of being able to have that data at your fingertips and have someone who's sitting there saying, okay, we don't need to send another truck out because we've got three on the way. We're getting close to time. It's about 5 o'clock. We're going to start to see traffic build up. We're not going to be able to get more trucks through here. We'll get there first thing in the morning and bring another two or three trucks and finish that paving.
how do you? I think, yeah. I mean, again, another great example of like you just talked about a few data points there, like traffic as a data point, location as a data point, weather as a data point, right?
Yes.
Um, how? I mean, how does like this is something that we really focus on, right? Like the UI component to it, right? Like
Yes.
how do teams consume this data so that they can do something with the data? Because data is great, like if they can't, but
Yes.
there's no point if they can't do anything with it, right?
And I think that that's one of the things that thinking about data in two different ways. I think that there's a field component of data and there's sort of a management operations sort of project management component of data. And I think those are two different approaches. I think like UI in the field has to be straight up, what do I need? I need very few data points, but I need the things that are actually going to drive my work at that moment when I'm standing there. I think
Mm,
that if you look at a lot of dashboarding, a lot of data points, it's very it's very executive oriented, but it's also very messy. So there's a
mm,
lot of data points, and it's not clear how that translates to I'm standing here in the field and I need to move dirt. What do I do?
right.
Okay, well, look, the look ahead schedule says that we need that dirt delivered, 200 yards further on. That we've got plenty here. We need to, it's not an I thing. We know how many tons we've delivered here. We need that tonnage, you know, 100 yards up because we've been working on that in 2 weeks or next
Right.
week. And I think that in the executive perspective, though, it really is, like it's going to be what are those lagging indicators, and then what are the things that are driving those lagging indicators. And that's why, you and I were talking about, you know, understanding and finding predictability and saying, okay, which of these elements, this is where AI, I think, comes in so critically. What are the dials that we can turn that we
Yeah.
know reliably affect the bottom line? Because in the
Yep.
end, when we're analyzing it, that we have a few dials that we can turn. We don't have a bunch, honestly.
Mm, yeah.
Um, what are the dials that we can turn? And let's focus on those dials. In civil construction, In a lot of companies, it's that unit labor cost. Unit labor
Mm,
cost is the dial that they're focused on first. But
mm,
then, materials is shortly thereafter, after equipment. After you've got your people and your equipment, the next biggest cost is that material. And how do we bring it in? Where is it going to be? And a lot of things could be done more efficiently. Like where are we setting up our laydown yards? Let's make sure we're thinking about that carefully and we could model that based on the available space and based on the schedule. You think about like where are we putting our concrete plant? Like we could model that and we could put that in the right place that's, optimizes the time to, nobody's thinking about that. I mean, those are
right.
dials that we could twist, but that's something that we could improve profitability is we could deliver materials better if we're thinking about that at the beginning strategically. And the only way we're going to get that is get the data in and then get it against a tool that's analyzing that data and predicting.
I absolutely agree. And one of the things that we've seen is pre-con data stays at pre-con,
Yep.
project data stays at project, and gets like, for example, procurement logs. They've created a procurement log. When the
Yes.
project's done, it gets buried away.
It's a
Nobody's using that
spreadsheet.
level
It's
of, it's a
saved. It's
spreadsheet.
done. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Gone. Yeah.
let's not even talk about how hard it is to sort of create that spreadsheet and track it, keep it updated. Nobody's then leveraging that data
Right.
or like even updating that data to um, track it with what actually happened and then take that data all the way to like pre-construction or at an executive levels so that you can
Yeah.
actually make decisions with data, right?
Right.
Right now, like the most pressing things like tariffs, right? And like that's what people are focused on. But like
Yes.
we potentially could have done things knowing that this is coming down the pipeline. If we had the data, we could have made some strategic decisions even before we
Hmm.
understood the impact of it. And that's sort of the key thing here, right? Um, and for us, it's always been like, okay, look, let's take them away from these spreadsheets and connect the dots across data so that there are no data gaps. Everything's flowing from one department to the other, rolling up to that executive level. So you can clearly make some decisions around material and supply chain. And it's happening. I think that's why we're excited and that's why we're writing. That's why we're educating as much as possible, right?
And one thing that I have to say, I go to a lot of conferences with a lot of analytics people,
And that's
and
how we
they're
met, by the
and
way.
that's how we met. We had
Yeah,
we sat and had coffee for 2 hours, and I think
I
we
know. It
missed
was
the
Austin,
keynote.
isn't it? Yeah, I
But
know.
um, the uh, the thing that interests me about those folks is they're constantly harping on the challenge of getting clean data out of the field. I can tell you if if it gets to the right level, they'll see that the data is not good, and then they'll go back and they'll make that happen. But
Mm,
until they're actually exposed to the data quality issue, until they're connected, they
mm,
don't understand the implications of that. And I think
mm,
that like one of the things that we've been working on with the importance of delivery tickets and the timeliness of getting that in terms of, paying our subcontractors appropriately, in terms of, tracking potential fraud, all of the things that we do for delivery tickets, is that, no one really had a sense about what the how big the box was, how challenging it was until we started looking at it. We look at
mm,
it monthly now, and
mm.
we do very well, but we are also going out and educating the field and saying, by the way, the executive team is looking at this every month, and this is where you consistently are having problems. So
Mm.
guess what? We're going to be talking to you about your data quality. And until it
That
gets up to the executive level, it's not going to be important to them.
interesting. How's been the adoption in that way? Like, are they
Oh,
open to? Yeah.
yeah, they're open to adopt. They want to do it.
Okay.
They're identifying some key issues with the way we're doing it, which is
Yeah.
great because you don't hear about it until it bubbles up because oftentimes
Yeah.
we're talking to the superintendent who's talking to the foreman. The foreman is the one who's actually doing the work, and so we don't necessarily even hear the complaints because the
Right.
super's like, "Oh, come on, just don't bother me with that complaint. Just do the job." Um,
Yeah.
But now that we're hearing it, we're like, oh yeah, well that's an easy fix. We can fix that in our
Mm,
data collection tools. Let's
yeah.
collect the data a little bit differently. And but at the same time, they also now are understanding why it's so important because we're getting the CFO coming out and talking to them about it. And if the
Right.
CFO is sitting and talking to the foreman about it, then it's an important thing.
Right.
And then they pay attention.
That's
But then
interesting.
that's how
Yeah.
you got to get data quality because it's got to be somebody with some, they're not going to listen to me. I'm just the IT guy.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
I really need to get somebody who, you know, not that just not only understands them, but also somebody at a level who can, make something happen.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I know we're like almost at time, but we can wrap this up. Like, I think I wouldn't call this controversial, but one thing that we run into a lot is trade partners, right? Like, what is their incentive to share data? Or like what's sort of the incentives? Like how is this useful to the trade partner, right? Because again, this is a
Right.
collective effort, right? We cannot like play individual games at a project level and we all fail, right? Like, and it's a role that a good general contractor plays well,
Yes.
aligning incentives across all of the key
Right.
players and making sure we deliver the project as a team. And so from a data perspective and from a supply chain data perspective, this gets a little dicey, right? Like we've seen that up,
It does.
right. So
Yes.
like, I think what are your like? I mean, you guys are vertically integrated. It's a little
Yes.
different, but you
Yes.
also have a commercial group that
Yes.
that is normally
Right.
operating GC. What are your thoughts around that? Like, what do you think are the incentives of the trade partners? Like, how should they collaborate with this?
I mean, I think it's a fascinating question. I also think that
Right.
it like gets into some really weird territory from a legal perspective about, collusion and collaboration and what level of data sharing is collaboration and what level is, like monopolistic collusion. We actually I've been through the training, what we can talk to pre-construction and what we can. But I also know that, you know, as we've started gaining more and more data around performance of subcontractors and material providers, that we're using that in our decision-making process. And so
Right.
if they're not as open, then they might not get selected. So,
Mm,
it could, but at the same time, I always feel like if there was a really nice collaborative environment where everyone could get together, like some of these processes that are really painful could could go away much more quickly. Like one of the things I love is we use Revisto for our commercial contracts for BIM coordination. And it's a completely new world. People who have never used it before, the degree of collaboration, mechanical, electrical, you know, the framing contractors, the drywall contractors, everyone's getting in there, and we have many, many fewer problems down the road. If we had the same kind of collaborative approach, like platforming, it could make a really huge difference in civil, I think, for sure.
we're gonna bring invite a trade partner for the next episode, and
I
we're
would
gonna talk a
love
little
to
bit
have a
about
conversation.
yeah,
Yes.
we're gonna talk to you a little about hey, like how did this help you, right? Like at the end of the day, like most of the projects that we're on, the trade partners are ordering material, and like
Right.
we're looking at how do we improve their lives, right? And how do we improve their labor teams and like their efficiency? So there is a huge part that they play here, and
I w- I would love to
definitely
talk to a trade partner. I would also love to talk to somebody, for example, maybe in concrete.
yeah.
Like that would be really interesting to see because that area of the industry is in hyper uh, technology expansion right now too. And how are they sharing data? Because one of the things with concrete delivery for now, we get our delivery tickets electronically from them
Mm,
already. So
really,
for
that's
some of
great.
our for some of our delivery partners, but not all of them. So,
Right.
like it's going to be a way for us to say like I can get my delivery tickets from this person, and by the way, your uh days old collection is going to go way down because I've got that and I it's approved and not only do I have it, I have the picture of the truck and I have the amount, the before and after weight and everything. It's pretty
Yeah,
slick.
yeah, I think like the standards and sort of the minimum level of like, yeah, call it like standards are improving across
Yes,
projects, right? Whether it's like
100%.
whether it's like something that you do with technology or whether it's like certain standards around safety, obviously that's
Yeah.
sort of leading the way for all of construction, which has been great.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, look, awesome talking to you, Adam. Like, let's keep doing this.
Yeah.
I think like the role that you're playing, educating and like sort of like synthesizing that information and making it clearer and easy to understand has been tremendous. And yeah,
Well,
we'll keep writing.
we'll keep writing. We'll keep writing. Guys, expect more. We've got more coming. So,
We'll got more going. Thank you, Adam.
all right. Thanks, Ash.